The general purpose, it's going to be in tiers. We're going to start with the most basic, and then we're going to get more complicated as things go on, and more organized. So you start with a general purpose, then you go to a specific, then we're going to have an activity where you try to turn your general into a specific purpose. Actually, no, you're going to come up with a bad specific purpose and then try to amend it to make it better. A central idea. This is whatever your main points are in your speech. Just today I'm going to talk to you about this, this, and this, or this and this, whatever. It's that statement. Basic outlining, we're going to have another chapter where we obviously go in more depth, as some of you may or may not know. We'll end with questions, and then we'll talk about next class on Tuesday, which should be chapter 6. So, the general purpose. Broadly, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to inform? Are you trying to persuade? Are you trying to entertain? What is the overall goal here? Because if you start getting bogged down and trying to do multiple things, that's really hard. It's hard to do those things simultaneously, so it's easier to just stay, I want to specifically do this. That's why in some speeches, like you're informative, you're only going to do this. And you're persuasive, you're only going to do this. You're not going to have any speeches in here where you're going to try to be entertaining, all right? But a comedian on stage, that's what they're trying to do. They could be trying to do these other things, like advocate for something or inform people about something, but that's their overall goal. So you have to think about in your speech, am I trying to tell you about myself, about this, about something, or am I trying to be more persuasive? The specific purpose goes a little further. It's a phrase, and it's a little bit more complicated. It's not just to inform, it's to inform about what, or the why, or what are you trying to do specifically? And I'll give you some examples so you don't get too tied down in what that means, because there's still another step after this. But the guidelines. It's got to be a full phrase, and it has to be a statement, not a question. Like, I'm going to tell you about avalanches. Like, it just doesn't. Figurative language is just, it's kind of like being vague, where you're saying, like, there's some stuff you need to know. There are some things I'm going to tell you about something. Limit it to one idea, because if you're saying, I'm going to try to teach you this and this, that's when you're going to your audience is going to get confused. Like, what are we learning about here? It should just keep it simple to one concept. And I'll show you what that means with some examples. But you want to try to avoid being vague. These two kind of go together. Avoid figurative language, avoid being vague. They tie in. A full infinitive phrase. So that's ineffective. Don't just say avalanches. I kind of laughed when I first saw that. I'm like, really? That's it. Just nothing specific, just that. To inform my audience about the 3 major kinds of avalanches. You can see where it gets a little bit more developed. It's getting more specific into being like, here are 3 major types. A statement, not a question. What is Dia de los Muertos? The Day of the Dead. When is it? May 5th. To inform my audience about the history of Mexico's Dia de los Muertos celebration. That's the goal here. It's not just the question, what is it? It's, I'm going to tell you about the history of this. And the history could be broken down. That word can be broken down into many parts. Part of that history might include, this is when it was first celebrated. This is how it's celebrated today. Here's some traditions you could do at home. Avoid figurative language. To persuade my audience, quiet down please. To persuade my audience that the campus policy of student parking really stinks. It's not what about it stinks. And again, that's just vague. So a more effective example would be something like more spaces for students before 5 p.m. Something more specific. So it could be like, it's poor because it doesn't have a lot of availability, all right? Or it could be something further, like there's just not enough spaces after 5. That's what I want. One distinct idea. I'm going to persuade them to become literary tutors and donate time to Meals on Wheels. Those are 2 different topics, and they'd be more effective if you broken them up into 2 different topics. Like, yes, you should do both. Like, I want to convince you to donate blood and to volunteer. But if I just said you should volunteer, I can say more specifically, more effectively, here are your reasons. You should donate blood, here are the reasons. More effective. So literary tutors or Meals on Wheels donation. Being vague. Something should be done about gerrymandering. Do y'all know what gerrymandering is? Not really. It's when they take a political district and they divide it to where it's obviously going to be swayed in a certain direction. You could take the state of Ohio and paint a little box around all of the more liberal neighborhoods, and then that's your thing. Or conservative, it's either way. It's hard to do without a map, but that's the idea. Something should be done. That's just too vague. Create a nonpartisan commission. Creating criteria for redistricting. Again, you have a plan. It's not just something needs to be done, because if you are just vague like that, nobody wants to listen. Something needs to be done. Be specific, like here's what we can do. Here's the solution. Here's the problem. And we'll talk a lot more about that in persuasive speaking. Okay, here's your activity. You're going to create an ineffective, specific purpose. So like those examples we kind of saw earlier, and I'll show you some examples of my own. You're going to revise that statement to make it more effective. So you're going to come up with something bad intentionally, and then you're going to fix it. And then you'll share if you feel like sharing. But here's some examples. To inform my listeners on how to shoot. What's wrong with that? Raise your hand. Who wants to tell me? Aiden? No? Yeah?
It doesn't say what the phone.
Right. What are we shooting here? This lacks specificity. It's too vague. It's just, are we shooting bows? Are we shooting guns? And that's a very complicated, different, are we shooting on horseback? You know, like that, those are very different things. Teaching my audience on how to hunt and fish. Jazz, what's wrong with that? You don't know? Anybody? The and? Yeah. It's because I should either be teaching you how to hunt or how to fish. And they are related, yes, but they're not the same. One happens on land, one happens on the water. You know, very, very different. Like, I'm going to teach you how to go bow fishing. That's something specific that gets into both, but it's one concept. It's not just this and this, it's this one thing. This kind of is like the first one, to persuade my audience to cook. Cooking what? You know, like just cooking ramen, cooking a roast. What are we cooking? So I'll let you cook and come up with something of your own. I know that was very cringy. I'm sorry. But yeah, come up with an ineffective example and then tell me how you revise that example. So you could think about this in terms of your personal narrative. You could be like, I'm going to talk to you about myself. That's ineffective. How would you break that down to making it more effective? I'm going to tell you about this, specifically this. So we're not trying to get into your 3 main points yet. Like we'll get there. But for now, just try to come up with something. I'm going to tell you about whatever. All right? I'll give you like 5 minutes. Thanks, Sheila. All right. That's my name for her because she's going to be talking to me a lot. Specific questions you need to ask yourself about your purpose statement. Does it meet your assignment criteria? Because like I said on the first day, if you give me an informational when it's supposed to be persuasive or vice versa, it's going to be, not good. You're going to be deducted. Did you accomplish in the time allotted? Because as you get more advanced, you're going to have to spend more time talking. So you'll start with just basics, 3 minutes, but then that gets up to 7 minutes. Don't worry, y'all are going to do great. Is it relevant to the audience? Are y'all going to listen if it's not relevant? No. If I got up here and I started talking about how to learn Mandarin Chinese, it's not relevant to you guys because y'all don't have, yeah, Aiden?
That's what we're at. That's
Really?
Like alien politics.
Yes, that's what our math teacher and
Yeah.
our math class, yes, I've been never paying attention to him because there was one day I decided I was like, okay, I'm gonna really try this time, I'm really gonna listen to him.
Mhm.
And he started talking about like what we were talking about, and then he was like, did you know that this would be different on Mars? Like Martians wouldn't be learning what we're learning, and I was like, yeah, you're right, he's like, I need.
Math. Yeah, I need to learn math, like
To be granted.
really throw him for a loop. Really throw them for a loop and be like, did they do math on Mars? Yeah. Is it too trivial for your audience? Because all right. Is it too trivial for the audience? Like, do they really, like, that's part of relevance. Do they care? Is this relevant information? But also, like, winter driving, that's relevant to some of you, not all of you, right? Because some of you don't drive, you take the bus. I don't need to pay attention to a speech about how to drive in the wintertime. And it's too trivial, like, I'm gonna teach you how to make a grilled cheese. It's not that complicated, you know? You butter, you bread, you cheese, you're done. That's it. That's 3 ingredients, you're done. So you have to think of a topic that's sort of not too complicated, but not too trivial, because that's the other thing. If it's too technical, nobody's going to be paying attention because it's just too far to comprehend. So a good public speaker can do either. They can take a trivial topic and lengthen it to as long as it needs to be, but they can also take a very technical topic and make it simple by using analogies, metaphors, what have you. Here we go. Bless you. Probably the most important thing from this entire chapter. Central idea. 1 sentence. What's the major idea? What are your main points? This is the roadmap for your audience. They know what to expect when you're saying, I'm going to talk to you about A, B, and C. But then you start telling them about C, then B, then A. It's very off-putting, very confusing. So in order, you're going to say, I'm going to talk about this, and then this, and then this. And we'll talk more about like how to organize it in a way that makes sense for your topic. But it needs to have at least 2 parts. So in this speech where I tell you about how to bake a 3-layer vanilla cake, I might spend the first half talking to you about the ingredients. The second half of that might be spent talking about the process. There might be a third part, but there needs to be at least 2. It can't just be all muddled together in one big clump in the middle. This isn't a letter. It's not like we're trying to say, hello, dearest, how are you? Everything I want to say, I hope you're doing well. I'm going to tell you about these 3 things. 1, 2, 3. Here were those 3 things. You do that at the end, too. You say, in the speech we talked about A, B, and C. Because the audience isn't going to remember everything you said, in essence. Because not only are our attention spans that of a squirrel, where we have like 5 seconds, and then we're like, I can't pay attention anymore. I need to have something in front of me. You know, our brains are just wired like that. They will remember those 3 things because you said it 9 times. ABC, ABC, ABC. The audience will remember if you reiterated it to them. I'm not going to ding you for being redundant. You're supposed to be redundant. And I know that seems weird, but it's simply because people can't pay attention. You know, it helps to sort of have an idea of a reminder, a roadmap. So here's some guidelines. Express it as a full sentence, that it's not, you know, it just sort of ends. It's just sort of like, I'm going to talk about this, and then it just sort of drops off. Don't express it as a question, because then it makes you seem uncertain. If I use the term upward inflection, who knows what that means? So if I ended all my sentences like this, with a little bit of spice at the end, or I was kind of a little bit uncertain, it makes me sound unsure. Whereas if you end definitively on a downward note, people know you're done talking. See, it's very plain, it's very evident. I know what I'm talking about because it's over. It's not over. So I hope you can see the difference there. Avoid figurative language, just like we said in the specific statement. Don't be vague. So here's some examples. The benefits of parkour. Man, I should have had that GIF of The Office when they're parkour and they're like jumping off the building. I should have had that. The benefits of parkour include working all your muscle groups, developing cardiovascular endurance, and boosting self-confidence. And you see how I paced it there? I sort of one by one by one. I didn't say working all your muscle groups, delivering cardiovascular endurance, and boosting self-confidence. That makes you seem even more uncertain because you're rushing. We don't want to be rushing in here. I'm sorry. Complete sentence. The benefits of parkour include boom, boom, boom. That's what your outline will look like. And then when you give your speech, you'll know. Boom, boom, boom. Your note card can look like that too. You don't have to come up here and have it memorized. You can have note cards. I don't think I ever told you that, but you can do that. But you don't want to put everything on your note cards because then you're just reading right off your note cards. That's not good. Statement on a question. What are nanorobots? You know, it might be a good attention getter, but there's better attention getters you can get. Like, did you know there's millions of nanorobots or something like that? Like, you know, nanorobots were first invented in this age or something, instead of just, what are they? Microscopic in size, they're being developed for use in medicine, weaponry, daily life. And again, this could just be used in medicine and weaponry, but daily life, that also gives you like probably another maybe 45 seconds to a minute of talking time, depending on how much you can lengthen out that topic. So you have to make sure that you're not putting too much in there to where you're going over time, but you don't want to go under time either. So you have to kind of determine how much should I talk about, how specific should I get, those sorts of things. Figurative language. Costa Rica is an awesome place for a vacation. I'm sure it is, but that's just too vague of a term, awesome. You can't objectively measure awesome. It's a subjective term. It's a feeling. More effective would be something like it has many attractions for vacationers, including spectacular beaches, lush rainforest, and stunning mountains. You want to go there more now because it's not just awesome. You know, I can go there because I know specifically what I can have in mind for myself. Beaches, rainforests, mountains, a lot of diversity, it seems like. Don't be too vague. Studying abroad while in college is a good idea. You lost me. You know, I am not convinced that it's a good idea when you put it like that. It helps students expand their cultural horizons, develop their language skills, and enhance their employability. And you see how I can use animation to focus your attention? It's not just bam, and then I read each one of them to you. One at a time, selectively giving you it to cultural horizons, developing language skills, enhancing employability. Now I have more of a reason to study abroad as it's a good idea. And then you convince your audience more too. So in an outline, you might start with your general purpose. I'm trying to inform you of the 3 major races in alpine skiing. It's not just to inform anymore. It's what are we trying to inform you about? And it's not just about alpine skiing. It's about the 3 different types of races, which are the downhill, the slalom, and the giant slalom. So public speaking doesn't have to be this thing for you to be afraid of if you understand this process, how to organize your information, how to deliver it in a cadence that works for you. All right? Because if you do this over and over again and you practice your topic and your delivery and what have you, you'll have nothing to worry about when you come up. Because you'll know. You'll know I'm going to take this much time generally for each of these parts. I'm going to go in this order, talking about X, then Y, then Z. You know? Because if you've never practiced, you'll come up here and you'll be like, oh shit. Maybe I should have gotten in the mirror and just talked to myself. And I know that seems really awkward, but it helps. Every little bit of practice helps. This doesn't have to be rehearsed. You don't have to practice a million times to come up here and then deliver it. And you shouldn't rely just on your improvisation abilities alone. All right? It's called bombing. You come up here and you just, it all falls apart. But that won't happen if you come prepared and if you practice, things will be hunky-dory. So if you wanted to organize these main points in your outline, it would be the first major race is this, the second one is this, the third one is this. And it might seem redundant to say that, but that allows your audience to pay attention and know, okay, we're not talking about the first part anymore. We're moving on. The second part is this. Okay, I can forget what I heard about the downhill and I can focus on the slalom. Because I know there's going to be more coming up when they get to that topic. So, are there any questions? I know this seems pretty like, well, duh, you know, but it's very important in terms of just your confidence in your speech. You know what you're going to do. I'm going to inform you about the 3 different types of skiing, and these are the 3 different types. So, If there's no questions. All right. Next class is chapter 6. And that's on Tuesday. All I'd recommend is that you read and do the homework, so we've already done that, so good for you. But that chapter should be more about organization. You'll have to forgive me for that. But I'll stop the recording here because that's all the content for today. Oh.